As an introduction to the Three Pure Precepts, I'd like to talk for a few minutes about Sange. Sange can be variously translated into English. My master used a number of terms. She used the term contrition. She used the term contrition and conversion. Sometimes she speak of it as self-forgiveness. Sange is the point that we reach in our spiritual life, and we reach it many times, sometimes in bigger ways, sometimes in smaller ways. The point where we reach where we clearly recognize that something we're doing is not working. Something we're doing spiritually, an effort we're making is not working. In some way we're using the will in a way that is counterproductive, that may be doing harm even. The moment at which we simply have that, aha, it's not working, that is Sange. And there may be a good deal more to Sange than that. But that's its essence. Because once we recognize that something isn't working, we can then get on to find out what will work. The act of Sange sometimes is accompanied by a sense of regret, a sense of remorse, contrition, being sorry, and one doesn't have to feel that. Sometimes that aha, it's not working, is accompanied by these feelings. Sometimes it isn't. When we have that moment of clear insight that something isn't working, it is accompanied by the acceptance of the consequences of our actions. That's an important part of Sange. And this helps free us from the tendency towards self-blame, self-judgment, guilt. Sange is not about guilt. It's not about blaming oneself. Sange culminates in a sense of renewed resolve and in consciousness that one needs help. Sometimes, of course, that help can come from man. And it's always a wonderful thing when that happens. And always, not sometimes, but always, we need the help of our own immaculate, wonderful true nature. Always the help of our true nature is available if we turn towards it in a true act of meditation, if we take refuge in it. This act of Sange happens in the life of training many, many times, in many, many little ways. Maybe a few times in very big ways, but many times in little ways. Just think what happens when you meditate. You could say that every time you catch yourself, you've wandered off, you've been hijacked by thoughts, you get swept away by feelings, and you come back. You catch yourself when you come back. There's a little moment of Sange. That doesn't work. If it worked, why wouldn't you just stay out there? The answer is, if you do stay out there, you end up suffering. You lose touch with that stillness. You get caught in opinionation, in doubt, in fear. You get swept away. And it doesn't end up being pleasant. So just that catching ourselves and returning is Sange. And my master sometimes spoke of every minute Sange. Every minute meditation, every minute Sange it's the same thing fundamentally. And you return to center here. Return to being fully present. And then there's a renewed resolve. Let's try to hold it here. Renewed resolve. And each time you do this, whether you know it or not, there's a deepening of faith. What is it in the end that we are returning to? It is something greater than ourself. I am not him, he is all of me. Sange is a kind of turning about, turning around, facing a different direction. When facing in a direction that doesn't work, you turn around, you're facing another direction. What direction is it helpful to face in? The Three Pure Precepts talk about that. The first of the Three Pure Precepts is cease from evil. I undertake the principle of training, I undertake the rule of training to cease from evil. What does this mean? What does it mean to cease from evil? Well, I've talked a lot in this little series of talks about getting swept away by greed, hate, and delusion, caught up in them, hijacked, however you want to put it. Cease from evil is saying, let's not do that. Let's not get caught up in the causes of suffering. Let's not perpetuate the causes of suffering. I undertake the rule of training so as not to be caught up in and perpetuate the causes of suffering. Human life is difficult enough. The starting point in training oneself, don't make it any worse than it already is. That's the first pure precept. I've talked about meditation as taking refuge in something deeper within oneself, something deeper than the thoughts, something deeper than the emotions, something deeper than the old habits, something more real, something enduring. The first pure precept is saying, don't take refuge in the illusory. The second pure precept is do only good. I undertake the rule of training to do only good. If we think in terms of taking refuge, it is saying, okay, so you're not going to take refuge, you're going to train yourself not to take refuge in the impermanent, the illusory, in greed, hate, and delusion. What are you going to take refuge in? Turn within. Take refuge in your own true nature. Take refuge in the eternal within your own heart. The fundamental meaning of the precept, do only good, is to take refuge through meditation and mindfulness in one's own true nature. The third pure precept, do good for others. I undertake the rule or principle of training to do good for others. Let's think for a moment about how that flows out of those first two pure precepts. The first pure precept, cease from evil, stop taking refuge in the wrong place, in that which isn't a true refuge, but only leads to more misery. The second pure precept, take refuge in your own true nature, in the immaculacy, in the goodness within yourself. Goodness with a capital G. Take refuge in that within yourself. The third pure precept, do good for others. Follow the lead of that true nature in your daily life, in your actions. Act from that place that you're taking refuge in. And in the midst of action, keep coming back to it. And then, because there is to it, there is no separation of self and other. Within the eternal, there is no distinction between self and other. Then you will be living from a place that is deeper than the distinction between self and other. In other words, to put it very simply, instead of pursuing either self-interest or other interest, for just pursuing self-interest as just being selfish and egotistical and demanding, narrow-minded and narrow-hearted, trying very hard to always act from other interest makes you a do-gooder. Instead of doing either one of these, act from the no-self, the place of no-self, and simply put the doing of that which is good to do, as that is shown you by your own deep spiritual instinct. Put that first and follow that. In other words, follow where your true heart, where your true nature leads you. And that will inevitably do good for others, because it will never act out of self. There is no self. What does this lead to follow these three pure precepts? We have to come back to good old greed, hate, and delusion, the three fires here. Greed, hate, and delusion are not some kind of absolute evil. Greed, hate, and delusion are, as it were, the raw material, sometimes very raw, and rather unpleasantly raw, but still the raw materials of enlightenment. Greed, hate, delusion are the raw materials that the training and meditation are working upon. And as they are worked upon through meditation and training in the precepts, they convert. And greed, acquisitiveness, grasping, clinging, ambition, all these are forms of greed, converts to generosity and gratitude. Anger and hatred convert to compassion and sympathy. And delusion converts to wisdom and humility. The certainty of what our true refuge is and how to keep in touch with it. And the humility, always knowing I am not him, he is all of me.